G'day everyone, it's James Davis from the Pax8 Academy again, and this time I have Danni from Pax8 as well. How you doing?
I'm really good. I'm really excited to join this. Looking forward to the chat.
Well, where are you based and what's your role inside Pax8?
So I am based in our headquarters, which is in Brisbane, Queensland. For those that don't know where Brisbane is, I'm sure you all do. And my role is the country manager, so overseeing sales revenue for Pax8 across all of Australia and supporting our teams to do all the great stuff that they do out there.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you on because it's a conversation don't get to have a lot with a lot of people. It's around talking with boards and C-suite. And it's becoming more and more critical for our partners to elevate themselves to that level. But I always have the challenge that they don't know how to do that. And so you're going to solve all the world's problems today. And we'll dive in. I'm going to ask you a simple question. In boards and C-suite, do they really want to know about all the technical detail?
Look, they really don't. They don't. They're so time poor. When I first presented to a board, I'll never forget it. And it wasn't in the tech industry. I was pitching for some extra budget that I required for that particular business. And because I was so passionate about the project, I naturally went into all the detail because, I'm excited. I'm an expert. And I got shut down so brutally. Like I felt like I was in an episode of Shark Tank. It didn't go well. I didn't get what I wanted. And it was brutal at the time, but one of the board members back then was a bit of a mentor, and she put me aside at the end of the day and kind of explained, when you're pitching to that level, it's a different pitch and it's short, sharp, punchy, and to the point because they've got a million other things on the agenda to get to. So I will never forget that lesson because it was a completely different pitch to say if I was going to see my CEO one-on-one or if I was going to go and present to different people in different levels of the business, but presenting at board level was a completely different process. And the key, my top tips would be, what's your why? What do you want? What's your call to action? And what do you need from the board? And that's it. No detail, no specs. It's just very clear, very straightforward, so they understand what it is you're asking of them.
It's very different to what most of our partners are typically used to, where they're working mainly with practice managers or operations managers, like detailed people that are worried about the business as usual, and often the CEO isn't too worried about the operations, so that doesn't get involved in those conversations. So where does that sort of hierarchy and that interaction between, say, those operations managers to the C-suite to the board, how does that dynamic work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's no simple answer to that because each business, particularly with partners out there who are managing different verticals, they're all going to have different processes. But what there will always be is a bit of a map in terms of decision makers. So you'll have decision makers in the business, which are often the ones you never see and you never pitch to in many, many cases. And then you have your champions or your cheerleaders. So your champions and cheerleaders open the door or they sell for you at the appropriate level if you can't get in. And I think the important part is uncovering who those roles are, because quite often you'll go in, you might speak to a practice manager or you might speak to the operations manager of whatever it might be, and they will tell you, oh, I'm in charge of everything. No, nothing comes through me. I have to do all the sign off. But what will happen at the end when you go to close the deal, it takes months to sign off and you're like, hey, where's the signature? What's going on? And that delay is because you haven't done your homework in terms of who is the final decision maker? What is the process? Who do we need to get to? And quite often those gatekeepers believe that they are the decision maker wholly and solely and want you to believe that. But again, you've just got to challenge that and ask more questions about, well, how long will the sign off take? Who else needs to sign this piece of paper? Does this need to go to your CFO? Do you have the funds in place? What are your timelines? What are your objections? And all those questions are so important because that'll help you navigate where you need to pitch and what you need to do next.
So it's really interesting, and that perspective from the pitch side, there's also that education side. Like what you've just highlighted is you might be used to working with that practice manager, and we've had to go through them with pitching and identifying that traditional stuff of lift and shift infrastructure changes and get budgets and stuff. But what we're having to do is shifting. That cybersecurity risk, that business transformation through digital transformation, probably not stuff that those people are actually making decisions on. So how do you sort of navigate those? Because they're very different conversations.
Actually, yeah, and they are, and this is forever evolving, and it's moving pretty fast. It's moving faster than us, people who are trying to work through this process, also the end user, the customer, because they're not quite understanding, and it's very difficult to try and get the right people in the right room that need to understand this. My top tip with that would be going down the governance question and ask, what are your governance processes? What are your compliance standards? And do you know that you're at risk without having these certain cybersecurity things in measure, or the way that you are structured is putting you at risk? Who would be the best person to talk to about this? Because that is, from a business perspective, it's a technical conversation, not in the sense of what we think technical. So you don't have to go into the whole tech of that particular product that you're going to put in place. It's technical in terms of their business functions and how they protect themselves. So if you were going to go around a different stack of licenses because it's going to reduce an insurance premium, that conversation would more likely sit with the CFO because they love saving money. If it's more around compliance and governance and ensuring they don't end up on the front page of the paper and they're fully protected, that would be a whole leadership discussion. And it comes back to, again, asking the questions and saying, look, this is what we've discovered in your business. We've seen some gaps. Here are the risks. Who is the best people to be in the room for us to discuss this so that you can make an informed decision?
What happens, and you've probably been in this situation before, what happens when that sort of key contact that you've got, their practice manager, you're talking to them and they won't put you in front of the right people to have those conversations, especially like cybersecurity is a really big one, that there is big risks that the business carries. And if that key contact is being that gatekeeper and not passing that through, we're sort of negligible in some ways as well. So how do you navigate that sort of difficult position?
That is so tricky because it's a fine line on how you want to balance it. But ideally you would have you'd have relationships with more than one person, I'm hoping, in accounts that you're managing. So that's where you need to go and gather more cheerleaders or more of those people are going to rah-rah your message. So whether that means you have to go around your gatekeeper or you just need to start pinning conversations with others that can get you to the right spot. But you just got to think carefully about how you do that because you don't want to annoy the relationship. Do the relationship you've got with that key person. But it could be just as simple of like an email. Did you know? Or send it out to the company with some facts. Use your LinkedIn presence. Do some social media posts to try and gauge that interaction. Or if you've even got them on LinkedIn, send them a private message just saying, oh, hey, we've had these discussions, just letting you know, giving you the heads up. But again, it's navigated through your own relationship within that business and you should know who you can and can't go to, but whilst keeping that main person in check because you don't want to undo all that great work you've done.
It's difficult. It's delicate. And I think as you were talking about that, what stands out to me is a lot of our partners have younger account managers that are less experienced here. And this sounds challenging enough when you've got experience to navigate. Does that add a whole other dimension of when you've got an owner and an account manager working on accounts?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And that's just experience. And sometimes even for me here at Pax8, where I have a great team of our salespeople, but being out with them, being inside their day-to-day and coaching is a really strong point. So if you are running a business and you've got a young sales team, go on the road with them, get them to put you in front of your customers, because you'll get a gauge of how mature those conversations are. And you can do that coaching. You can set time aside once a month. It doesn't have to be that often, but that gives you an idea of where they're at and where they're growing. Also, the flip side of that is that you keep the pulse on. So you're actually hearing from the customer's lens, which is so important because it's so easy to get disconnected from that. If you're just hearing what your sales reps are giving you the feedback for, it's not always going to be the holistic view. So going in and seeing customers yourself as much as you can is definitely high recommendation. And as a senior leader, if your account manager is kind of stuck with a gatekeeper, you can definitely be the bad guy and go around that person and use your own relationships to get through if you need to.
I think that what you just wrapped up there with the sort of team approach, it works very well. Like, I started in this industry as an account manager. That was my first role. I was like 23, so I knew nothing. You couldn't throw me in front of a board and the big CEOs to have strategic discussions. I had no idea. So the owner that I worked for, he held all the strategic stuff, and I was the one doing all the operational and the stuff to action for the CEO that when he needed things. And that created that team environment, those different types of relationships across those organizations. And we were able to go have multiple different approaches and be a lot more strategic with our clients and deliver the outcomes. So I think we fall into that trap of thinking one person to one person as business relationships.
I agree. And you can get disconnected from that really quickly because we all get busy and you start to build a really great team and you start to get great. That one thing over there is sorted, why do everything else? But you are right. And I think keeping that reminder in the back of your mind too, that C-suite enjoy talking to C-suite. It's the way it is. So your customers want to see you as a leader. Some of the best businesses I've seen back in my healthcare days was where the actual MD or the CEO went out customer visits frequently and was seen. That just made such a huge difference when tenders came and all sorts of things because they had the personal relationship that someone had taken time to come and see them in their own world and just be part of it and be a true partner in the business. So I think that's really powerful.
With that, one of the things that I often hear, and I've seen the challenges personally, is the change of leadership happens with C-suite. Obviously, with most businesses, if you're working with an owner, founder, they're there for a long time. But most organizations, as we go up the chain, they've got that C-suite sort of structure. It's prone to churn. So how do you manage that relationship change from a strategic perspective, from your experience?
Yeah, I think at that level, you should have a really good, sound relationship, depending on what level you're servicing that business with or that customer. You should know before that resignation hits. They'll tell you, they'll give you the heads up, because often it's a small little world. Australia's even smaller. They're going to go to someone. They're going to be going to another business. So it's all very interconnected, and that networking piece is the critical part of that. So it's kind of you are looking after the business, but you're also networking with them and their career. So ideally they would be giving you the heads up so you would know. Then you'll be able to have some conversations about what that succession planning would be and who might be replacing that person. And also the positive part is they're going to go to someone else, and you've already built that relationship, so that gives you another opportunity where it is that they go. So it's kind of that old saying of don't burn bridges. Keep that networking strong because they're going to go somewhere. And someone's going to come through. You just need to be across it.
That's a really good point. And I think we always think the relationship building and management part is just the building a personal relationship, which obviously helps. I think I find partners, because most partners have grown their businesses organically, they're the owner, they know how that sort of business operates. Often they have only had frontline jobs before that, and they haven't been at the higher tiers. Probably don't understand what the C-suite roles actually are and what their objectives are generically. You mentioned like CFO, right? Like they're in charge of looking at money and how to either do more with less or cut costs. Like they're pretty clear objectives. What are some of the other generic objectives from the C-suite that our partners should be aware of so that they can actually connect with these people that are often going to be quite different to what they are?
Yeah, I think as you said, like each C-suite member is going to have a different KPI. So yeah, as you mentioned, CFO is pretty simple, just the numbers. Well, not just. It's very data driven. It's very black and white. CEOs typically will have a bit more of a broader breadth. It could be headcount. It could be increase in market share. It could be growing a whole region. They might be in charge of not just Australia. It could be APAC. or they could be climbing the ladder, which will change the whole dynamic of your relationship with that person. You need to know what their goals are. But typically a CEO will have a lot more of a holistic KPI function around the business, which is people, finance, even tech, so making sure they've got the right technology. So all those main departments, sales, they all fall within that, and they are responsible for all of those things. So they're very fluid, and it's important for you when you're building your relationship with them to know how can you make them look good, because at the end of the day, that's what they want you there for. What is it that you can offer that's going to make their life easy and that's going to streamline things for them, because they're looking after so many different moving functions. And ask the question. Not everyone loves talking about themselves. Doesn't matter who they are.
I think Australia and New Zealand and our ASEAN partners, we're all probably more humble in general, that don't like to talk about ourselves. There's some that will, but most won't. So if we don't ask, we won't know, which I think is an awesome point. And I think what you mentioned there as well, like there's multiple functions in a business, and traditionally we focus on the operations and finance because that's where technology fell, because it was a cost, capital cost, and all of this sort of stuff. Shifting, you need to start working with your marketing CMO, your chief marketing officer. You mentioned sales there, people and HR. There's multiple different people there that have different perspectives, and they're all decision makers with technology now compared to the old days. So we have to shift our mindset on who we're working with.
Yeah. And actually, even some of if you think of sales or HR or marketing, those people within a business can champion change for you. And they're the ones often on the social media having a look at what's the newest and best. And they're the ones driving their own C-suite to say, hey, we really want something like Copilot. Like when that launched, I had a bunch of my old colleagues ring me that day that it was announced, say, do we need this? I think I need it. I'm like, why? Why do you want it? And they were going to go sell it to their CEO to go get that license for them. So it is important you stay connected to those people within the business as well, because they're the ones chasing change. They're the ones that are going to ask the questions internally for different tools or different things that they might want to do to be more efficient. And a lot of what we do in technology helps those people in those roles be efficient. You think of a HR manager, how many things and tools that they use has changed over the years, but makes their job and their function more efficient. Same with sales, same with marketing, and it all relates to technology.
And it's a good point to contrast again the a sort of innovation and productivity side compared to the risk and compliance side. Different roles will have they'll swing to different sides of that sort of spectrum, but everyone has a need for innovation and risk. They'll just have different profiles. So it's not a one size fits all message either when you're doing this. I'm very intrigued. Like you've told me a lot about the C-suite. Where does the board fit into this? What are they focused on? What are they responsible for?
So at boards, it can be non-existent in some businesses. And even if you think of big global businesses, so I'll just pick out one that's from healthcare, because I know that industry or that vertical really well. So if we think of someone like Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer, so their board would never sit locally in this region. So their board would be a global board full of bunch of different people. So the chairman's probably some founder, advisor, and some billionaire somewhere. And those people would be very rarely seen because it's a massive global company, right? So it just wouldn't be worth your while targeting the board at that size business. But as you have smaller businesses and you come through like local ones in Australia, they might be supplying globally, but they will have a board. Those roles are really to keep everyone in check. So they'll generally, if they've got equity or they've got investors that are financing the business, just depends how the business structure is set up. The board will have a role to drive compliance, to negate risk, to manage finance, and to stay on track whatever the target is, growth, momentum, market share. But those board members are responsible for making those final decisions and to de-risk the business from making bad decisions and falling over. And at the end of the day, those board members have a legal binding, well, it depends on how they're set up, but a legal binding role where they are actually legally bound to make sure these decisions are made correctly within the business. So it's a pretty serious role. Board members can come from people who work in the business. They could come from people who don't work in the business. They could be anyone around that. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I won't be long. So I think, again, it comes back to you have to ask questions. Like, do you have a board? Because they might not. How does that board function? How often do you meet? What outcomes do they drive? And who sits on it? Who's your chairman? And then who are the other people in that business that sit on the board? Because it will be very different. No two boards are the same.
That makes complete sense. And I think the biggest challenge that I see for most partners is they never ask about the board. They just assume the CEO is like them as an owner and they can make whatever decisions they like and that's all they need to worry about. But what you're talking about there is like they're sort of the final decision makers in a lot of this. They're the ones that have appointed the CEO, right? Like, so they're that level above. And what sort of, I know I'm asking a generic question, but what sort of level of decisions typically go to the board for them to make the decision as opposed to CEO or below being able to make their own decisions and run with it?
Yeah, and again, it will just depend on what flow through they've put through on authorities. But it would be more, this is very generic, but it could be more if they're going to go make a massive investment that is outside of the realm of the normal budget. So you'll have your working CapEx and your OpEx, and you'll be doing your EBITDA and whatever else that stays pretty stable. And then when you meet with the board, you would just report on those numbers and make sure that there's nothing terribly wrong. But outside of that agreed budget, so if you decided you want to go buy a business or do some acquisition, that would be decided by the board. Or if you need to dramatically increase your headcount for whatever reason, those decisions would be decided. Or the sadder side, if you need to restructure and lean up the team for whatever reason to make sure that you're hitting your numbers, all those decisions would go through. If there was a major change in terms of compliance or governance or a huge audit that could put your business at risk, all those types of things would sit through board level in terms of what are you going to do about it? How are we going to process it? What resources do we need to deal with this issue?
So from understanding that, from your perspective, what sort of interactions should our partners be having when there is a board in an organisation?
I think there would be a really strong opportunity to ask if you could make time to go present to the board where the business is now in terms of how they're protected with their technology and with the changing environment with cybersecurity and checks and balances that they need to now have in place, because don't assume they know this. They won't know it. I didn't know it till I joined Pax8, so I found email security really annoying. That's how basic I was. I didn't understand how important it is. Now I get it. Now I'm on it. But they won't know those. They won't know the why. So, and my top tip to everyone would be go and ask if you can present to the board about the changing landscape and how to de-risk your company so you don't end up on the front page like Optus did or Medicare, and pull that narrative in and say, do you want to be this? Do you want to be on the front page of the news tomorrow? We can help you protect that, and this is what it looks like. Because they're not really, they won't tolerate the two. They won't think that they need to do that unless you highlight it, because it is a huge risk and everyone would lose their jobs if they don't have the right things in place.
And so going back to one of the comments you made very early on in the session was the way that you present to boards are very different. So you mentioned how like you didn't have a very successful pitch. How would we want to what are the tips that you'd give for someone that's not necessarily even going into pitch, but just to go and provide that advice at the board level? What are some of those best sort of practices and techniques, I guess, to be more successful at getting the message across?
Yeah, lead with data and facts, but chunk it down. Just keep it to 3 bullet points, no more on whatever slide you're presenting. When you're talking about de-risking, you need to have a baseline. So make sure you've baselined the business to where it is today. And you can say, here you are, and they might be pretty well protected, and that's not a bad thing. You're doing okay. But is okay good? Like, okay is not good and good is not great. And we want to be at great. So you can have a timeline of where you are now, where you suspect you could take it in with less pain, and where the big investment will need to be is here. And have that very clear cost and time and resources very clearly, succinctly laid out on the table or whatever, however you want to present it. That's all they need to know. They don't need to know the how, the what, and all the details behind it. They just need to know what does it cost, what's the time frame, and what's the risk to us if we don't act.
That's probably where most of us go wrong, because we go straight to the detail. We try and talk about what solution we're going to use and all of this kind of stuff. And often too, I've seen board members that have technology experts, allegedly, and it brings it down to that level, which you're never going to win at. And that detail you're talking about sounds a lot more logical and a lot more business focused.
Yeah. You can have all your resource pack. So if you've never been, or if you've never sat in a board meeting before, go Google a board pack. So a board pack is generally sent to a good board, is sent prior to the meeting. And the board pack is everyone's presentations and the reference or the data points that if you are someone that's more detailed, you can click into this pack before you attend the meeting as a board member, and you've got the context before anyone talks. So make sure if there's a board pack that you can add your pitch to, ask, and you can do that. So you can put all your detail there and you can reference that. And then when you get questions, you say, oh, that's in your board pack on page 182, reference blah. But I'm going to keep moving through this so that we keep on time. And this is where we're going to go. But have all your data in the background, but keep your message simple.
That's some really good advice of being prepared in a lot different way to what we're used to. What stands out to me from that conversation is this is just a very different engagement to what we're used to. And I'd probably highlight to people, we probably haven't priced in this level of effort to providing that level of advice. If you've got, maybe I'm just picking some random numbers here, you might have 10 clients that have boards that you need to do this all for. And they legitimately need this level, like you pointed out. They probably don't know all this risk and what they should be doing, and they're looking for this advice. You're going to have to start valuing your time and looking at how to modernize your engagement so that you're not doing this all for free. This is immense value to reduce business risk and help with that productivity and innovation. So I'm learning a lot from this conversation, Danni. It's great.
Oh, good.
Look, I know you've told me a story before, and we don't need to name names. He knows who he is, but you've mentioned you've worked in like a healthcare company, and you had an MSP at that point, and you were working with the board. Do you want to talk through that sort of story of where they were going wrong, and then how that sort of changed through them changing the way that they were engaging?
Yeah. So I was in a startup, so a company that backs startups basically. So I was developing a healthcare innovation, and the parent company, who had a board, I would sit on that board because I was part of the lead of one of their innovations, had a really great MSP looking after them. And the reason they actually instilled that MSP is because they actually got hacked. The MD phone got hacked. So he kind of understood, yep, let's put all the cybersecurity stuff in, let's do all that because it was meaningful and it hit home. But what I realised when I left and came to Pax8, there's so much more we could have been doing with that MSP. So what had happened was I was developing this innovation. We were going for some government grant funding, which requires a whole subset of horrendous documentation that you need to draft. And part of that documentation was actually putting in place a cybersecurity plan, a de-risk cybersecurity plan that and it has to be all government speak. And then also I had to buy cybersecurity insurance. So by this point of the grant, I'd already filled out 10,000 ISOs and QA documents and work cover crap. Like by the time I got to this part, I wanted to truly scratch my eyes out because it was just like, oh my God, what do I do with this? And I ended up just doing it myself. It took weeks, and I just used Google and ChatGPT and put something together, which was probably terrible now that I think back. But it wasn't until I came to Pax8 that I realised I could have just rung that MSP and he would have done all that work for me. And I would have paid anything for it at that time because we were going for $50 million. So So anything that took the time away from my focus was worth every penny. But I just didn't know, because I didn't know the function of the MSP. To me back then, the MSP was just putting email security on, which annoyed me, fixing my laptop when it broke, putting my phone systems in. I didn't understand what else sat behind that MSP.
I think happens day after day after day. I hear all the time when a client moves it to another MSP, and I might know both MSPs, and all of a sudden the client's spending a lot more money, but the other MSP was talking about how they weren't getting much traction. And a lot of it's just this perspective we haven't engaged, like you've been talking about through this conversation, and we're not vocal in what we actually do, because most of us are only people that fix the broken laptop and chuck a email security thing in, and we aren't actually going and advising. We're not working at that level. So why would we be treated that way? But like you said, there's so much opportunity people are willing to spend. So if we don't go in with that bias and make purchasing decisions on their behalf and just understand their needs, we'll be able to elevate ourselves very easily and capture a lot of this revenue, because the stories like yours every day in every business.
Yeah. So many things. And I think I feel guilty now because I've really undervalued what that whole function was in so many businesses, both global and locally. But it's fascinating to me because now I can see it. I'm lucky because I am still coming from the customer's lens, so I get it. But it's almost as simple as, did you know we do these things? Did you know we can audit you? Did you know that we can write your cybersecurity plan for you? Did you know we can solve potential insurance costs? Like, even those taglines will get a bunch of people in any business going, oh my God, you're joking. Just bring it up. Mention it as often as you can.
And with as many people as you can. It's not just the one contact. I think that if that hasn't been highlighted already, that should be at least one of the biggest takeaways from today, is you need more relationships with more people. I want to get your opinion before we start wrapping up. You, like you said, you were on the other side. You've been in roles. You've seen that MSP, and you haven't truly understood what they've done. How did you view them, more than just like fixing the broken laptop? Were they typically the people that would you'd see as a roadblock? Are they people that would create innovation? Are they just like tradesmen behind the scenes? Like, how would you sort of sum it up?
Without being disrespectful, because I don't think this now, but back then it was just like a tradesman to me, because we outsourced the function. In my head, what happened was it was just reactive, right? So something went wrong, let's call them. Or, okay, I've got 5 new staff, I need to onboard them, let's call them. Or, I pressed the wrong link and I've just had the whole company nearly hacked, let's call them. So that, because it was a reactive relationship rather than a proactive relationship. So if you flip that around, and that we had in place regular cadences, we talked about what value and what things happen in that last quarter, that last month, that were related to the business. And it could have been a report on, we stopped X amount of cyber attacks through these systems that we do for you, or we implemented some systems that made you more efficient. Those types of things, you'd start to have the proactive conversations, and you'd build the realization of like, oh wow, you are bringing so much to this business. You are helping us be efficient. You're helping us save money in different ways that are not the typical ways that you'd normally think.
And to put you on the spot, just off that sort of what you're saying there, is there another sort of profession or job role that you would go, if there's someone to copy that business, in the roles that you've done, the business has embraced them as part of the business and a partner, that's someone to copy? Do you have any examples that you'd point out?
Sales enablers. So people that go and do sales coaching, consultancy to drive better, to help salespeople grow or help sales organizations propel. They do it so well. They've been doing it forever and a day. And obviously, yes, they are salespeople and they're really good at it, but they immerse themselves as an outsider into businesses for years and become a true trusted advisor. They are excellent. So there's a lot of them. It's a busy space, but they always win.
And why is that? Apart from their sales, they're just born salespeople, right? That's their job. Like, what is it that they actually do that gets them in for so long and has that sort of level of relationship?
They navigate the decision matrix. Can't even speak. The decision maker matrix. They navigate that process really well. And some will have some systems. There's one called Miller-Hyman. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it's a really good basic system in terms of mapping that out. But what these people do, and some will just do it really naturally, some will do it methodically, they work out who's who in that structure, who do they need to hit, when and why to get their outcome, which is basically selling their consultancy, right? That pays their bills, it keeps food on the table. But they do that exceptionally well, and they actually also immerse themselves into the business at all levels. So they, the cleaner will know who they are, through to the top senior managers. Everyone knows who this person is. They do that incredibly well.
That's some poignant advice that probably wraps this up very nicely. And hopefully the partners have learnt quite a bit from this session. We could keep talking about this, and obviously we've just gone surface level, very generic. What do you want partners to take away from today, and what do you want them to do as a practical next step if they've realised, holy crap, I don't know what I'm doing now, and Danni solved all my world's problems? What should they go and do?
You know what? I think it's really simple. Like, I'm not going to complicate it. Just go and ask more questions. Think like a journalist. So when you're inside a business, don't be scared. Just ask as many questions as you can. And don't be afraid to say, who else? Who else should I be speaking to? This is a great, I really love my relationship. Who else needs to know this? How can you help me navigate through here so that we can do the right things together? Those types of questions and conversations are so powerful. And my one tip to anyone who's learnt new sales is a customer will tell you everything you need to know to sell your solution to them. You just have to ask the right questions.
I think what I've taken away from this this session and all the wisdom that you've shared is that we need to change our mindset. We're no longer just technical guys doing things and fixing things that are broken. We need to become business consultants and business advisors. And we're not going to be treated that way unless we act that way. It's not going to be a magical day that the client relationship that we've got, they're going to come and go, we need to elevate and mature this. They're waiting for you to do it, or they're going to go somewhere else. They're not going to spark it with you. So you need to start from asking those questions, but then start elevating yourself. Put yourself in there. Business consultant, like you said, they have these systems and processes. They interject at different levels and understand the business and then come back with solutions. An advisor they will come up and work with the high level people and understand what's going on and provide advice. We can't be waited to be invited to the table. No. Someone else will be invited to the table if we're not fit.
100%.
Well, this has been awesome, Danni. I hope all the partners that have listened today are going to take these lessons and go have better relationships with their clients and open up more opportunities. They can be the ones that are going to cut other people's lunches that aren't stepping up and being proactive.
Yeah.
And hopefully they will help someone in the position that you were in that's going for a $50 million grant, and they'll know that they can get help because they've already been educated. So thank you so much for your time today, Danni.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great chatting. Thanks.
No worries.